Next up, we have Jack Petropoulos, who's a selectman from Groton, Massachusetts. He's a member of the Tennessee Gas Pipeline Working Group Committee, and these folks have had a crash course on all things FERC and natural gas pipeline related as they gather together and try to educate themselves and their community about a proposed new high-pressure gas pipeline coming through their region.
So again, my name is Jack Petropoulos. I'm one of the selectmen in the town of Groton, Massachusetts. I actually lived, before moving to Groton, in the town of Hopkinton, Massachusetts, which has a Tennessee gas pipeline coming through it. I lived about 600 feet from that pipeline and really never knew it was there. And when I did discover it, I actually kind of enjoyed it recreationally for quite a while. And then I moved to Groton, got elected as a selectman, and now Tennessee Gas is coming to Groton. Think about where I'm moving next, and you can decide if you want to move there. So I'll tell you a little bit about the town of Groton and our experience with the pipeline. So the town of Groton is just a classic, beautiful New England town, full of apple orchards and pastures, white chapels. It's got a population of around 10,000 people. It's about 35 miles outside of Boston. It's got a town meeting form of government, which means that we have twice a year a town meeting that attended by a few hundred people that approve everything from our budget to dog leash laws. It's a wonderful way of getting things done and really involves community involvement. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what the town meeting has done in a few slides. We have an enormous commitment to open space in Groton, having preserved almost 50% of our land mass in open space in one way or another. So we spend a lot of money and a lot of time in open space in our town, and many towns around us do the same thing. It's a pretty well-educated town. There are strong incomes. We tend to vote mostly red or Republican, although most people in our town, and in fact in the state of Massachusetts, are unenrolled. Earlier this year, we were notified of a proposal by Kinder Morgan of a pipeline that would come through our town as well as a number of other communities in Massachusetts. It would bring 125 miles of greenfield pipeline, 75 miles of lateral pipeline off of it, bringing over 2 billion cubic feet a day of Marcellus shale gas from Pennsylvania, through New York, through Massachusetts, ending in northeast Massachusetts in a town called Dracut. The process has moved along pretty briskly. There's been a pre-filing at FERC, or through FERC, in September of this year. And if things go according to plan, Kinder Morgan will be in business in November of 2018. Here's the proposed route. And I wish I had my pointer with me here, but coming out of Pennsylvania up through New York to a town called Wright, Pennsylvania, and almost to the border of Massachusetts and into Massachusetts is an existing pipeline. And in fact, there's an existing pipeline that goes through southern Massachusetts and up into the Boston area, and that's where I mentioned I lived before. The purple on the top, where the pipelines diverge, is the new pipeline. It goes through a lot of open space and through northern Massachusetts, ending in that town called Dracut. The impact to Groton is actually not as big as the impact as to some of our neighboring communities. I'll show you a map in just a minute. There are 17 private properties that are impacted by this, a small number of large conservation properties that are impacted by this. There are, as you would expect, enormous public safety concerns by the citizens in town when they heard that this was coming. There are also lots of thoughts and concerns about landowner rights as the prospect of eminent domain looms. We're told that the company can survey without our permission if they need to, and can simply come through if they need to without our permission, and simply pay us what they believe market value is for the disruption to the land. There's also this concern about the cost that electric ratepayers will pay for the capacity that we'll need to reserve in order to bring this gas into town. In fact, the rationalization for bringing gas through Massachusetts is that we have a shortage of natural gas in the Northeast, and indeed that's true. The question is, how do we pay for this transmission? And there's a new vehicle being proposed called a tariff on electrical generation that folks are quite concerned about, and whether or not it's really truly fair and whether it represents our portion of the consumption of the gas. One of the big concerns is that all this is being done in an effort to facilitate the export of gas out of the United States, and that we'll suffer this disruption and this cost only to pay in part for a pipeline that will benefit other people. And lastly, you saw from our commitment to open space, et cetera, that we're a fairly environmentally conscious area, and there's a lot of discussion about how this distracts from alternative energy development. So there are some things that Groton wants to know, and we've asked a lot of questions of Kinder Morgan. We ask questions of a lot of people, including our elected representatives. I get asked these questions as an elected official. Is there really a need for this gas? Indeed, we have a shortage of gas, as I mentioned. But do we need this capacity? And are there alternatives? Is this solution really proportional to the disruption? This will hurt a lot of people in our town. It will disrupt their lives pretty significantly. What will the benefit be to them and to our community? Can't already disturbed routes be used rather than coming through greenfield space as the plan is here? Can't we go along the major highways or some of the other electric generation lines? And again, who really benefits from this? Are we benefiting from it for the 2 months a year when peak gas needs are not met by current supply? Who benefits from it year-round and from the volume that's going through? Kinder Morgan has come to our town and had some meetings with us and with other towns, and an enormous number of questions were asked of Kinder Morgan, and they vowed to get back to us with the answers to those questions. Those questions have never come back, not one, or the answers have never come back, not one. I'll show you a map in a minute that was submitted to FERC with a pre-filing. It was based on 1980s topographical map. And the details on that map are very different than the details in our town today. And lastly, we would be paying a tariff. Electric consumers would pay a tariff 12 months a year for capacity that we would really only use 2 months a year. Why are we paying 12 months a year to fund a pipeline that we'll only use the benefit from 2 months a year? So here's the mapped impact in the town of Groton. And as I said, the impact to our town is small compared to that of others. So this comes through the northern corner of our town. And so we are hit relatively slightly by this. But take a look at a couple things. First of all, the area in yellow is our high school. It comes through our high school property. Now, the fact that it comes through our high school property is really largely because our high school property is so huge. But nonetheless, it comes within 600 feet of the track and field where kids are all the time doing everything from playing football to running track. But more importantly, pay attention to the buildings and the residential areas that you see here. This is current occupancy in the town of Groton. Here's the map that was submitted. You can see on the map the dots represent homes. So if we go up, if we go up, you see all those dots? If we come down, where'd they all go? This is the map that was presented to FERC to show where this pipeline would go. Now, I don't know what was assumed or what this map is supposed to represent, but it surely doesn't represent the disruption to the people of the town of Groton. So the town has taken a number of steps. Our town meeting, which again was a meeting of around 300 people, voted to pass a resolution in opposition to the pipeline. Many towns, in fact, all of the towns through Massachusetts did this exact same thing. It's a non-binding resolution. It's mostly symbolic. We've sent letters to state and federal authorities, to anyone who would listen, and copies of those letters to just about everybody. But there's been aggressive letter writing. We had a selectmen's advisory committee that was just mentioned, of which I'm a member. We took the unusual step of prohibiting Kinder Morgan from using our roads to conduct their surveys. That didn't work out very well. It's not legal to do that, and so we had to retract that. But we came up with another idea, and we have a bylaw, or we passed an ordinance that required companies who were going to survey on the public roads to get permission from the selectmen. Well, that didn't work out well either. But we're trying. We are participating in a coalition of towns that have gotten together to try to figure out what we can do. It's worth noting that coalition of towns, 11 towns, has not been able to agree on even whether they want to, as a coalition, come out in opposition to the pipeline. And that's because various entities have various ways of looking at how you're going to deal with this. Are you going to simply oppose it? Are you going to try to say, I can't prevent this, so I'm going to negotiate for the best position? And so this coalition of towns hasn't been able to come up with a set position on this yet. And I think both of those views are actually quite valid. We did propose a bylaw to require the planning board to approve construction. And at town meeting, that bylaw did not pass. So while our town meeting was in favor of taking some actions and our selectmen were in favor of taking some actions, at the same time, folks have voted no to some things. So I think you're seeing in our town a balance in terms of people trying to figure out exactly how they do want to approach this thing. We also proposed establishing a legal fund in town, dedicating $50,000 in hopes that other towns would come up with a legal fund that we could band together and perhaps throw some real money at this thing. That did not pass through the Board of Selectmen either. There have been a number of grassroots and regional efforts. The state has been pushed into conducting an environmental study focusing on the need for this new gas supply, leak mitigation as a way of getting the gas that they need, and alternatives. There's been political pressure. It's been the election season. It's very easy to get politicians to oppose things. There have been a lot of grassroots groups, yard signs, summits, walkathons, you name it. At the end, our options come down to two things that I've already really mentioned. One is to resist. Just do everything we can to prevent this from happening. And I'm not really sure we can do that. Another is to negotiate, as I've mentioned. How do we, if it's going to happen, how do we put our town in the best position? And so that really comes down to why I'm here, because in addition to being asked to come, I wanted to learn. I want to learn, does resistance affect our ability to negotiate? If I push back today and the pipeline comes tomorrow, have I hurt myself in my ability, in my position to negotiate later? Is there such a thing as successful opposition? I hope to learn that today and tomorrow. And lastly, what do I tell people in my town? What do I tell Kinder Morgan? So in closing, these are the things that Groton wants Kinder Morgan to know. Now remember I said that I lived right on a pipeline and had really no problem with it. In fact, I enjoyed it. And when the idea of a pipeline coming through Groton came in, I thought as a leader I might help to calm people's fears about this thing, to add some perspective from someone who's lived in a town like that, didn't have a problem selling my house, etc. But I've gone through the last 4 months of dealing with a lot of what we've gone through. So really, when you say you're going to answer our questions, you lose credibility when you do the following things. You say you're going to answer our questions, and you don't. You just don't. When your FERC filing uses antiquated data and makes it look like the impact is less than it really is, that is an impact to your credibility, at least for me. When you don't return communications from people like me who reach out to you and want information that they can use to help to resolve the concerns of the community, and you don't even return those communications, you lose credibility. And when you lose credibility, you create active opponents. Thanks.